It was a freezing December night, just a week before Christmas. Every year, my family spent the holidays at our summer house in the Hamptons, New York. The place was always silent this time of year. Most of the houses belonged to wealthy people who only visited during the warmer months. My dad and I arrived before the rest of the family. My mom and sister still had work until the weekend, but school was already out for me, and my dad was retired. Since we had nothing else going on, we decided to get to the house early. Each of us had our own bedroom in the quiet house at the end of a dead-end road. As always, my dad went around turning on the heat, water, and everything else that needed to be reactivated after months of being vacant. I brought my PS3 and spent most of that first day gaming in my room. That night a heavy snowstorm rolled in, one of the reasons we came early, hoping to avoid the dangerous road conditions that follow after big storms. The next morning, when I walked into the kitchen, my dad casually asked me when I built a snowman. I stared at him. "What snowman?" He pointed out the back window. Sure enough, the yard was covered in nearly 2 feet of untouched snow, except for a snowman standing in the center of the yard. It had stick arms pointing upward, and a smiling face carved into its head, staring directly at our window. "I didn't make that," I told him. My dad shrugged and said it must have been the neighborhood kids. He treated it like a harmless joke, so I didn't think too much more about it. But the next night changed everything. I was asleep when a sharp thump hit my bedroom window. My heart jumped into my throat. I hid under my blanket, trying not to move. After a few minutes, I convinced myself it might have been snow sliding off the roof. I slowly got up and peeked through the blinds. I screamed. Right outside my window stood another snowman, this one much closer than the first. Its face wasn't smiling. It had a deep, angry frown carved into the snow, and it was positioned directly in front of my window like it was watching me. My dad rushed in when he heard me yell. When he saw it, he wasn't amused anymore. He said he'd talk to the neighbor kids' parents in the morning. But the next morning, the neighbors weren't home. No cars in the driveway. They weren't even in town. That was the only nearby house with children, so the situation only became more confusing. For the next several days, nothing happened. Then Christmas Eve arrived. The whole family was finally together, including our grandparents. It was dark out when someone knocked on the front door. No doorbell, just a knock. We weren't expecting anyone. My dad called out, "Who is it?" A shaky voice answered, Please let me in. I need help." There was no peephole or window near the door. We couldn't see who it was. My dad asked what was wrong. "I don't have anyone to spend Christmas with," the voice said. "Please help me." Everyone in the room exchanged looks. My dad raised his voice and told the person to leave before he called the police. There was a pause, then the voice said, "Okay, I'm going. Don't call the police." He never tried to open the door. But all of us instantly connected this to the snowman. And we were right. On Christmas morning, a note was taped to the front door. The handwriting was messy and childlike. It said, "I just wanted to have some fun. I made the snowman for the boy in the house. I don't have anyone to spend the holiday with." Whoever left that note and built those snowmen wasn't just lonely. They were unstable. Whether they meant harm or not, the fact that they were roaming around our property, staring into windows, and knocking on our door at night was more than enough to terrify us. We never found out who it was, and none of us ever wanted to. Christmas of 2016 was supposed to be unforgettable, but not for the reason it turned out to be. My name is Andra, and I was 21 at the time. My whole family traveled to Miami to spend the holidays at my Uncle Joshua's apartment downtown. Coming from Connecticut, celebrating Christmas in warm weather felt strange but exciting. It was the Friday before Christmas Eve when my younger brother Nico and I decided to go out. He was 18 but had a fake ID, so we figured we could check out some of the Christmas-themed parties happening around Miami Beach. The first club we tried was a disaster. $100 entry fee, and the bouncer immediately spotted Nico's fake ID. Embarrassing. So we went to a smaller bar a few blocks away. Thankfully they let us in. People were wearing Santa hats and Christmas sweaters, giving the place a goofy holiday vibe. We headed to the bar, and before long an older woman, mid-40s, wearing a blue Santa hat and a very revealing Christmas sweater, started talking to Nico. I overheard her telling him how she loved younger guys with accents. Honestly, it sounded creepy, but Nico was flattered and not thinking straight. They talked for so long that I ended up chatting with a group of guys next to me. Then Nico suddenly tapped my shoulder and said he was leaving with the woman. I told him to be careful, but he just grinned and walked out with her. I didn't stay much longer. I ordered an Uber and headed back to my uncle's place, assuming Nico was having the time of his life. Halfway through the ride, my phone rang. It was Nico. When I picked up, all I heard was static and then a man's voice, not Nico's. A second later, another man began yelling in the background. I kept saying Nico's name, but the call cut off. Panic hit me instantly. I tried calling him again and again. Finally, someone answered. But it wasn't Nico. It was an older man with a deep, unsettling voice. He claimed he found the phone on the sidewalk. Before I could say anything else, I heard shouting in the background. Nico's voice, screaming my name, screaming for help. Then the call dropped again. That was the moment I realized something terrible was happening. I begged the Uber driver to pull over and let me out, then called the police. By the time I got back to my uncle's building, my family was awake, terrified, and already questioning me like crazy. The police came and I gave them everything: what the woman looked like, what bar we were at, what time Nico left, everything. While the police drove us back to the bar to check security cameras, my phone rang again, an unknown number. It was Nico. He was breathless, shaking, crying. He said he had been kidnapped and barely escaped. A stranger had let him use their phone. We raced to the location he gave us, a dark street in North Miami. When we found him, his face was beaten badly, both eyes bruised, blood on his shirt. His phone, wallet, keys, everything was stolen. Later, at home, Nico told us what really happened. The woman claimed she ordered a rideshare. When the car arrived, they got in, but it wasn't a rideshare. 2 men were inside waiting. One grabbed Nico by the neck. The other hit him, threatening to shoot him if he made any noise. They drove for a while, planning what to do with him. One of them used Nico's phone to call me, trying to intimidate him into staying quiet. When he screamed my name, they beat him again. At one point, the car slowed down. Nico wasn't being held at that second, so he took the only chance he had and jumped out. He sprinted until he found a stranger on the street who let him call for help. The police never found the woman or her accomplices. The security footage wasn't clear enough. Christmas was ruined, but we were grateful he survived. But that night, Christmas night, we were all shaken awake by Nico's screams.
"She's in the house!"
He yelled. He was dreaming. But the way he screamed those words, the fear in his voice, it made all of us sleep with the lights on. And I still remember the woman's smile from the bar. Wide, strange, unsettling, a smile that still makes me uneasy every Christmas. A few years ago, my brother George and I bought a small house together. For our very first Christmas there, we decided to host a family gathering, partly to show everyone the new place, and partly because it had been ages since we were all together. Our family isn't very big. It was just the 2 of us, our parents, our aunt and uncle, our cousin, and our sister with her husband and 2 boys. My sister arrived early with her kids to help us cook, and she brought their dog Mika. Since they lived 2 hours away, they planned to stay the night. Everyone else lived less than an hour from us, so they weren't staying over. Not that our little house had much extra room anyway. During dinner, at one point the conversation drifted toward the recent murders in our county. Bodies found out in the woods. My mom and sister quickly shut the topic down, insisting it wasn't something to talk about during Christmas, especially with the kids listening. After dinner, we moved to the living room, had wine, and let a Christmas movie play in the background. Eventually, people started leaving until it was just my brother and me, my sister, her husband, and the kids sleeping in the guest room. The 4 of us adults stayed up a bit longer, drinking more wine. Around 10 p.m., my girlfriend stopped by since her own family gathering had ended. She stayed for the night, and eventually we all went to bed. The voice in the woods, I woke hours later to my girlfriend shaking my shoulder. The room was dark. Still half asleep, I looked at the clock. It was a little past 2 a.m. Before I could ask what was wrong, she whispered, "Listen." I held my breath and then heard it, Mika's low growling from the hallway. I got out of bed and stepped into the hall. That's when I felt a cold draft hit my face. The back door was wide open. Mika stood frozen, staring out into the darkness. I checked outside quickly, thinking maybe one of the adults had stepped out, and that's when I heard it. My brother's voice calling my name from somewhere deep in the woods. He sounded far away. Thinking he needed help, I rushed back inside, told my girlfriend, slipped on my coat and shoes, and grabbed a flashlight. There was a thin layer of snow on the ground, just enough to show a set of footprints leading from the back door to the trees. I shouted for George. His voice called back again, same tone, same distance. I followed the tracks into the woods, but they faded quickly until there was nothing left to follow. Still, his voice kept calling my name, same distance every time. A strange fear settled in my stomach. Something felt wrong. I stopped going deeper. The woods were dark and endless, and I didn't want to get lost. I pulled out my phone and called George. He didn't answer. I kept yelling for him, but suddenly the replies stopped. The woods went completely silent, not even an insect, just the faint sound of wind. Then my phone rang. It was my girlfriend. When I answered, she said, "Shit, George is in his bedroom right now." I froze. "What? Are you sure?" I asked. She checked again, and then also confirmed my sister's husband was still asleep on the pull-out couch. In that moment, every hair on my body stood up. I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone in those woods. I didn't walk back. I ran. Hard. I didn't stop until I saw the glow of the house lights through the trees. When I got inside, everyone was awake. I told them everything. The open door, the footprints, the voice calling my name. The looks on their faces were pure horror. Someone out there had mimicked George's voice and knew my name. We debated calling the police for about half an hour before finally doing it. When the officer arrived, he asked all the usual questions. Was anything stolen? Did we know anyone who might want to harm us? Had we seen anyone suspicious? He stayed for less than 30 minutes before telling us to call again if anything else happened. Nothing did. But to this day, we have no explanation for the open door, the footprints, or that voice in the woods. And since that night, I refuse to go anywhere near those trees after dark.